As some of you know, 10 years ago, I dated the son of a killer. He murdered and raped a 10-year-old girl about 45 minutes away from here. This happened in 1994. His crime was so heinous that it pushed people to try and reinstate capital punishment in Iowa, which was abolished in 1963. Capital punishment is the execution, is the ultimate crime for first-degree murder. This no longer includes rape cases. Globally, around the world, we see that this is no longer coming into effect. Canada, Mexico, and all European Western countries have abolished or simply quit using capital punishment. I found these facts in my ethics book by Lewis Vaughn. In the United States itself, in 1976, it was deemed unconstitutional, and we actually stopped capital punishment for an entire year. States then reinstated what they thought was appropriate for capital punishment individually. We lost 39 states to capital punishment during that time frame. These are just a few statistics that I found, also out of my Lewis Vaughn ethics book. Something that most people don't know is that between appeals and habeas corpus, it takes roughly 15 years to actually become executed when you are on death row. I found this information by Bill Curtis in his book, The Death Penalty on Trial, Crisis in American Justice. Something else that I found very interesting was that most people on death row either acquire the death row phenomenon, which is the psychological impact of prisoners for long periods under harsh conditions, and then they're living within the shadow of knowing that they're doomed. This is sometimes considered cruel and unusual punishment, and it can increase suicide rates as well as the increase of mental health, deeming them insane. And when someone is deemed insane, they no longer can be on death row. They only have life sentence paroles. So 6 of the main arguments between retentionists and abolitionists for capital punishment is prevention and maintenance of further crimes committed. This is the very first one that I want to speak on. It is where they feel that we can prevent and deter crimes by having capital punishment in effect. When this happens, criminals that could potentially commit more heinous crimes are being deterred. We are finding that this is more prevalent through statistics, that this actually no longer happens, and that criminals actually just try harder not to get caught. The next thing that I talk about is the fundamental moral principles regarding the dignity and the value of human life. This is where abolitionists come into effect. They feel that hardened criminals have the right of life. They should have the dignity that every other human being deserves, even if they commit first-degree murder. Retentionists feel like they do have the right to life. However, it is not absolute. You take a life, you deserve to lose your life. I did an interview with Jay Warden, who is the warden at the Mount Pleasant Correctional Facility, which is where I'm from, and he sent me a few brief messages about what he felt on capital punishment, and I would like to elaborate a little bit on this at the end of my presentation. Retributivism is a term that's used for the punishment deserving in proportion to the severity of these criminals' offenses. When this happens, we are talking about if people deserve to be punished and if it's a matter of justice, or if it overall serves the welfare of all society. So we want to determine is, are we finding justice versus vengeance in our judicial system? So we are trying to offer peace to victims versus the criminals, or should we realize that because they took a life, then they do not deserve the dignity, and we are just recognizing them as a human themselves, so they deserve to die. The next thing that I would like to cover is how an argument is about the unfairness to poor and minorities, especially blacks. Statistically, over time, we have realized that blacks were more prevalent to being committed for the death penalty under the assumption of rape versus actual first-degree murder. So abolitionists who are against the death penalty and they would like to get rid of it is saying here it's usually just the poor and the illiterate that are getting the death penalty instead of whites themselves. The next thing that we cover is cost. So the cost of capital punishment is huge right now in the debates about this. Abolitionists have proved that an execution costs $2.16 million more to execute a person than to give them a life sentence and all the cost that is acquired in that. So people are saying, especially Bill Curtis, he says, can't we use that money instead for Medicaid, education, fixing our highways? As an example, Texas had put 2 highways on hold to execute one person, and that was just their trial. It cost Texas millions of dollars to have this trial be in place of Texas. Whereas retentionists said, it doesn't matter what the cost is because we are maintaining justice. This is important. Cost should be irrelevant. So to stand on those lines and decide which side you'd like to take, I think the biggest thing that we think about the most is, what about saving the innocent people that have been accused of first-degree murder? So my most important part of this oral argument is, how do we justify executing the innocent? And again, I took from Bill Curtis. He said, and he was an anchor on CBS News for 30 years, as well as a lawyer, so he had multiple degrees in this, but he says, in our justice system, the possibility for error is simply too great to allow the death penalty to stand as our ultimate punishment. There are other avenues we can take. Whereas retentionists will always say, there is always, and I'm sorry here, but I have to read this, despite precautions, nearly all human activity costs the lives of some innocent bystanders. We do not give up these activities because the advantages, morals, or materials always outweigh the unintended losses. So, and to prove what Ernest Van Dien Haan said, we have proof statistically that from 1900 to 1983, 7,000 executions were taking place in the United States and only 25 of them were deemed innocent. Were those 25 lives worth the other 6,975 people we executed to keep heinous crimes off the streets? So in conclusion, I ask you this: which side would you take to prove the capital punishment should or should not still be reinstated throughout the United States in all 50 states?